Let me show you how much the United States...
Chat, I always wanted this, chat. Guys, I usually have a take about this, but maybe I'm wrong. Let's learn something today.
Military.
Last video.
Over here you've got Russia, China, India, and other big military powers. And yet, if you combine them all into one, the US still spends more. More than the next 10 countries combined. But I'm interested in what happens inside of this circle. Like, what are we spending our money on?
Wow, freedom, brother.
In here, we'll see everything that the military spends their money on, from salaries for soldiers to elementary schools for their children. We'll see the $21 million helicopters, and these missiles that cost $1.6 million each. And we'll see how much the Pentagon spends on the development of new weapons, new technology, like these ship-based laser weapons. And of course, the most expensive...
Wait, rap means rhythm and poetry?
xQc. Did you know? Rap stand for rhythm and poetry. What a revelation, don't you think?
No, you're making some shit up.
Expensive of all, the F-35 fighter jet that will end up costing the taxpayers $2 trillion.
Oh, wow.
We even made a little model of this guy. And like the real thing, the model is continually breaking down. Oh, okay, here we go.
Yeah, the door thing is really hard to put in.
Yeah. Of all the money our Congress budgets to run our government on any given year, almost half of it goes to the military. Here you've got education, and there's diplomacy,
it makes sense,
health science, energy, environment. We've been deep in the spreadsheets and the data. Luckily, all of this stuff is pretty public and open to scrutiny, with the goal of visualizing all of this.
Chat, when you're playing Clash of Clans, how much of your base spending goes on defense? I mean, most of it, right?
Understand where the money goes.
Think
to understand why the US spends so much more than any other country on its military. And most important of all, to try to answer the question of whether all of this money actually makes us safer.
Almost all of our witnesses before the Armed Services Committee tell us that we are in the most dangerous global threat security since generations.
This is the Pentagon's budget for 2023. It's how they planned to spend money that year. It turns out that how much they spend on defense is pretty complicated and depends a lot on who you ask. So go to the sources, you can see how we got all these numbers and what decisions we made. The total number we got was $853 billion. That's more than the entire economy of Switzerland.
Let's take a break. Really give me any good ideas.
I want to talk about another kind of budget, an annoying part of my... know how to spend generations and close to half of all of this money goes to the vague sounding category of operations and maintenance. This is $352 billion that we spend just on O&M. That's like larger than the entire economy of Portugal. Like just to create the report, to get all these numbers assembled in one place, costs the DoD $269,000. But also, credit to the Pentagon and the US government for giving us all of this very clear data that we can shine a light on and scrutinize. A lot of countries aren't this transparent. So anyway, operations and maintenance. This is like all the costs required to keep the Department of Defense, one of the largest organizations.
All right, here's the brain think of how I would do it then. I would start using most of that money elsewhere, right? But all the military shit, right, is just for show. People think it's also operational, and it's just an illusion, like a blowfish, right? And they're actually spending on things that matter. But they could convince the world that all the shit is still working, and they're gonna go crazy, but they can't, because the shit's actually garbage.
Running. It's a lot of not very sexy stuff, like transportation, fuel, maintenance of equipment, administrative costs, training expenses. It includes $39 billion just for the doctors and health services for active duty personnel. And it also covers the stuff that you don't really think about when you think of military spending, like environmental cleanup in areas that the military has left unexploded bombs or spilled chemicals in the local environment.
That makes sense.
It also includes disaster relief and humanitarian money, which is something the military does as well. Here's nearly $1 billion dedicated to anti-drug activities. And here's $10 million for security at international sporting competitions. This huge category also captures the cost to run every one of the US's approximately 1,250 military bases, including the approximately 800 bases that are not in the United States, that are in other countries, which, by the way, are quite expensive to run because the US military has basically created a slice of America in these other countries. You've got Pizza Hut and McDonald's and Subway and grocery stores with products flown from the United States to make military personnel serving abroad feel like they're right at home. Okay, but let's just pause right here on this map because this is a good moment to recognize that the United States military...
What if they weren't there, though? What would happen?
...is not a normal army. It is not a normal military. Most militaries are tasked with protecting their country, securing their borders. But the US military is so much more than that. It sprawls out throughout the entire globe, giving the US control over every corner of the planet.
I think it'd be naive to say nothing. I think that's brain dead. You say peace, brother. I say World War 3, 4, 5, 6 at the same time.
Allowing the US to be the global policeman, where it enforces the rules and norms of the system that it created and from which it benefits immensely. So one quick answer to this big question of why the United States spends so much more on its military is actually pretty simple. Because this is the cost of being the global hegemon, the one who gets to enforce the rules and maintain control over the globe. Okay, but let's keep going on our budget. That's the point of the video. The next big category here is people, military personnel. $172 billion.
That makes sense.
Pay, benefits, retirement, healthcare for the over 3.4 million soldiers, reservists, and civilian military personnel. By some estimates, the Department of Defense is the largest employer in the world, though it depends on how you count it. The Pentagon also spends a lot of money on recruiting new talent, like the $28 million that they spent on hiring experts who work in artificial intelligence. Next, the military spends $140 billion on research and development. And a reminder, I know that these numbers are abstract and billion doesn't mean anything to anyone, but like $140 billion, that's the entire economy of Morocco that the Pentagon spends on R&D.
That doesn't give us any idea
about the future, with the goal of maintaining technological superiority on the battlefield.
Any grasp on what that is.
They're working on new tech. It's a huge part of what the Pentagon does. Now, a lot of this stuff is classified, but we do know that the Pentagon is spending money on stuff like AI, using AI to analyze.
The amount of power you're going to use in the next 43 days is exactly the amount that it would take to power 43 Teslas and 2 iPhones for 7.4 days. Think about that.
Drone footage.
Think about that for a second.
Their targeting
Holy shit, think about it for a second.
Building autonomous submarines, or these insane military lasers that they use at sea to attack other ships.
It's not.
For years, they've also been trying to develop this
that
exoskeleton that will supercharge the abilities of their soldiers, allow them to carry more weight over long periods of time. Although this technology, while potentially promising, isn't really there yet. But it might be soon. Now, the Pentagon pours a lot of investment into these technologies for the battlefield. But sometimes this tech actually turns into stuff that we use every day. Like GPS, drones, voice recognition, the computer mouse, and the internet itself are all technologies that were first developed, at least in part, by the US military.
That's right.
The World Wide Web, or the web, was created for and by the United States Department of Defense.
Let's quickly look at this smallest of the categories, still $19 billion, but compared to all these other ones, it's pretty small. This is construction, building new facilities, both at home and abroad.
Wow, that is pretty
like
little.
This little project, $85 million for jet fuel tanks in Japan, supporting force projection in the Pacific. Or it looks like they're proposing $75 million to spend on a new operations support facility in Southern California. And finally, we get to the part of the budget that you probably think about when you think of military spending. Procurement.
What is that?
$167
Getting raw
billion,
materials.
the entire economy of Ethiopia, to purchase all of this. Okay, I've always known that military stuff is expensive, but now I really know it. Let's look at some of this stuff.
Holy! Well, that's actually pretty cheap.
This jet costs around $142 million. The US bought 77 of them in 2023 and is asking for another $14 billion to buy 83 more this year. And they're pretty spendy to fly too.
That's pretty cheap.
Look at these 4 cruise missiles parachuting out of a plane.
Okay, out of all costs, 30 minutes of flight, 20K, that's pretty little. Bro, that's almost 1-to-1 for Predator.
Look at these 4 cruise missiles parachuting out of a plane.
Yeah, really.
Each one of these missiles costs $1.6 million.
Oh my god,
and
it
the
is, that's
American
very
taxpayer
cheap.
bought 600
Bro,
of them last year.
You're gonna compare a fucking $11 billion machine and you're gonna offset that? Oh, yo, this is not 20K flights for 30 minutes? That's nothing. Brother, it's because your brain doesn't understand the actual, the numbers don't make sense for your head in the billions. You don't see it. 20K compared to this is literally nothing.
This vehicle costs $372,000. It's used to move troops around the battlefield. Last year we bought about 3,700 of them, and this year we want another 3,100. $2.8 billion buying 24 of these F-15s. For the Navy, this is gonna cost $7.3 billion. $1.2 billion for these 56 Black Hawk helicopters for the Army. $8.2 billion for 3 destroyer-class ships, probably doing the same thing with those subs are doing.
Fleet replenishment,
Okay, that's expensive. Okay, hold on. Okay, I will agree. Let's be honest. One big mega bomb cannon Bing 3K, that's not crazy. A rocket 480K? Okay, chill. Oh, okay, dude. Okay, dude.
$2 billion. I mean, it's a lot. And these are just a few tiny little samples. I'm just scratching the surface. And in fact, this diagram that
it
looks
locks
so
on!
complex and granular is also highly simplified.
Oh, it locks on. That's like saying, dude, the new iPhone is $10,000. And you're gonna say, but it has a camera. Oh, okay.
And condensed.
Like, it doesn't
Each
cost
one of these
$500K to get a
categories
fucking lock-on
actually
machine.
contains billions of tiny little things inside of it. This organization is much
500K?
bigger than we could ever fathom. And in fact, it's much...
This chat has lost its mind. Brother, these military contracts, they're getting fucking milk with the people who make them. It is what it is. Not on everything, right? But especially for some of these technologies, yeah, they're getting fucking milked down to a crisp. What the fuck are you talking about? That's the whole problem. The spending wouldn't be that bad if they weren't getting milked by the fucking military contractors that are building this shit, dumb fuck. What is wrong with you?
bigger than the Pentagon itself can even fathom.
The Pentagon has up
What do you
until
think the cost is to make that stinger? 500K? You're crazy.
this point in 2024,
The margins are probably
never
like fucking like
successfully passed
60,000%.
American taxpayers want to know how our tax dollars are getting spent, and the fact that the department that's getting such a huge chunk of the federal budget can't account for all of the dollars it's getting is definitely a problem.
For 6 years in a row now, the Pentagon has failed to pass an independent audit. They've brought in a bunch of accountants and said, tell us where all of our stuff is and what we spend our money on, and the accountants say, no, we can't do it. 61% of their physical assets are missing. They don't know where they are, which means they're probably investing a lot of money in stuff that they already have and they just don't know it. But my bigger question here is why? The United States pulled out of Afghanistan a few years ago. The war in Iraq is over, but spending continues to go up. And spending went down for like a split second, but look, it's going up again. Okay, well, first off, remember what we talked about earlier. The US is not a normal country with a regular military. The US is the global hegemon who uses its military to assert control and order over every corner of the globe. But there's another reason why this budget is so high. And this reason is much more infuriating to me.
What would it cost to make the lock on for a military rocket launcher? Blah, 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 blah. Among the, what? 10K. 20, yeah. What? How did I get cooked? This is, what? Yeah, brother. It's because instead of getting contracts that get them money to invest into R&D, they factor in the fucking R&D price into the fucking units that they're selling it. That's dead what's happening here. Like, what?
What our little graph here doesn't reveal is that most of this money is going to private corporations who get 466 billion of these dollars, about 54%. And once again, the US government tells us exactly which corporations they give all this money to. We pulled the last 19 years worth of data on these private contractors. At the top of this list, you start to see the same names over and over. Raytheon, General Dynamics, Boeing, Northrop Grumman, Lockheed Martin. These are the names at the top of these lists, year after year. There used to be a lot of different defense contractors, but over the last 3 decades, they got gobbled up by these big 5. Transitioning, from the words of the Pentagon, from 51 to 5 aerospace and defense prime contractors. As a result, the DoD is increasingly reliant on a small number of contractors for critical defense capabilities, i.e. we've got kind of a monopoly issue on our hands. These 5 contractors own the space, and the Pentagon can't really go elsewhere if they need an F-35. There's only one shop in town that makes it. For this reason, the prices can get pretty out of control. Like the Pentagon used to pay $25,000 for this Stinger missile, and now they pay nearly $500,000 for the same missile. The price went up more than...
All right. I'm gonna read the apologies in the chat. I'm gonna read some of the apologies. Let's see some of them. Chat, can we get a few apologies? You're right, Lamau. I'll take that. I'll take that. Pre-watch. Sorry. All right, no problem. Still done. Gotcha. Anything else? Fuck you.
16 times in just a couple decades. It's a little more than inflation.
There's a history of defense.
They're factoring the price that they spent on research, right? And also factoring the fact that they're doing research for the future, for new stuff, so that they don't fall behind the dumb fucks. If you fall behind the dumb fucks, you become the super dumb fuck. You never want to be that position.
Contractors
you never want to be the
US
super dumb fuck
government, they
ever.
can overcharge.
It's the worst
if they're
position.
the only company producing a certain widget, then there's no competition, and that's one of the problems with monopoly. Is if there's not competition, it's easy to overcharge the buyer. In addition,
if you're the super dumb fuck, what do you have to do? You have to buy. You have to buy, and they're probably selling them this at a premium, like a mega premium.
The Inspector General of the Department of Defense has found routinely that there's overcharging through corruption and waste and fraud. And there have been lawsuits. For example, KBR is a contractor that's been used overseas, and they were found to overcharge in dining halls by 30 to 40%.
It's also why a Pentagon inspector
in
realized
dining
that
halls?
the Pentagon was paying Boeing, yes, that Boeing, $3,357 for one.
Brother, they're suing them because they're selling the food in the cafeteria for too much money by 40%. Like, out of all things they're getting sued for, they're getting sued for over hamburgers.
A small little piece that the Pentagon could actually get for $15 in their own warehouse. $15.42 to be precise. When the Pentagon does get around to investigating these contractors, they sometimes find that they're taking huge profits, like 40 to 50% profit margins, giving them hundreds and millions of dollars above what they should be making in any kind of typical business environment. And what do they do with all these profits? Well, they pay their executives very well. But this list also tells us what they do. This is a list of how much money these defense contractors spend to influence our lawmakers into spending more money on the military so that these companies can make more money. You can see right here that Lockheed Martin is at the top of the list. So far this year...
Wait, hold on.
Right here that Lockheed Martin...
Dude, that's it? Man, chat, I'm telling you, chat, guys, I said this before, chat, this will sound out of touch. It's not out of touch. I'm always impressed every time we watch a video like this on how cheap it is to run the world. It's so fucking cheap. 2 mil? Brother, these guys are selling like 300 billion worth of dog shit. And they're gonna get these contracts and shit like that for 2.7 mil? Even if it was in billions, it doesn't matter. It's still nothing yet.
List. So far this year, in this election cycle, Lockheed Martin has spent $2.7 million, split pretty evenly between Democrats.
Imagine you would have to spend 1% of your yearly income on securing those contracts. 1%. Are you brain dead? 1% on having those... Dude, you guys are crazy.
Democrats and Republicans. This is a number that will continue to go up as we get closer to the election. And it is money spent to cozy up to lawmakers on both sides of the aisle, contributing to their campaigns, bringing them out to show them how great their weapons are, doing whatever they can to make sure that the money keeps flowing to their companies. These companies also benefit from the infamous revolving door. The revolving door is not a literal door, it's a metaphorical door between the Pentagon and the defense corporations, which allows top military leaders like Jim Mattis to serve in the military for decades, retire as a general, and then join the board of General Dynamics, a defense contractor, only to pass through the proverbial door to become the Secretary of Defense under Trump. After which, he passes through the door again to go back onto the board of General Dynamics, bringing with him all of his insider knowledge and government contacts and influence. And no, this is not just Jim Mattis. This is a very normal thing that people do here in DC. One analysis found that in 2022, top defense companies hired
Am I done saying that this makes sense?
672 employees directly out of the Pentagon to work as lobbyists, board members, and executives. Go check my sources if you want to read more about this. I mean, yes, the revolving door is metaphorical, but it's also pretty physical and literal. I drive on this freeway all the time, and I'm always struck at how close all of this is. Over here is the Pentagon, and over here are all the defense contractors in an area of town literally called Pentagon City.
If there's someone working in government who is deciding on contracts and they have a conversation with someone who's going to receive that contract, the person in the firm can promise a good high-paying job after that government official is out of government. And so the government official then has an incentive to give a generous contract to the contractor because they know they're getting this kind of quid pro quo. They're going to get a high-paying job after they leave government.
And to add insult to injury here, some of the lawmakers who approve the Pentagon's budget own stocks in the defense contracting companies. Like, the lawmakers get richer if we spend more money on defense.
Guys,
no.
Classic. They're just good with money. They're making good investments. Yo, Nancy Pelosi, she's just a stock god. It is what it is. Chat, me and you, we're just bad. We're dumb fucked. We're not good at it. Nancy Pelosi, she's a grandmaster.
Why do we do this? Like, this is like classic, basic, simple. Like, no conflict of interest. We should not do this. This is not a thing we should do. But actually owning stocks in these companies is not the biggest way, I think, that our lawmakers are influenced by defense contractors. There's something more subtle going on here that I think is actually the best explanation. And it has to do with this excellent map. This map was assembled by an Air Force veteran and analyst named Christian Sorensen. This map makes it easy to see how contractors intentionally allocate their operations all across the country, spanning dozens of states and political districts. Building all of this stuff means jobs, which people like. So lawmakers are incentivized to keep these contractors making stuff in their district, to provide jobs for their people, so they can keep getting elected. It's honestly brilliant. It's smart. This is political engineering. You can see it very clearly with lawmakers like Roger Wicker, a senator from the state of Mississippi. Senator Wicker is a member of the U.S. Senate Committee on Armed Services, which plays a huge role in giving taxpayer money to the Pentagon, which in turn feeds the bottom line of the contractors. Wicker loves the military. You often hear him advocating that we should spend way more on the military.
Makes sense.
We need, in the United States, to spend more on defense. It's a necessity.
He writes op-eds in the New York Times calling for more shipbuilding. And when you look at his state, you realize, of course he does. The largest employer in Mississippi is this naval shipyard run by a defense contractor named Huntington Ingalls.
Felix is the game.
He likes the
means
boats.
more
What
jobs
can
and
you do?
economic stimulus
Your
for
girl
Wicker's
has a
people
long
in
S
his
law.
state, which
Not-
means a better likelihood of being reelected. Now, these defense contractors know
He's
that
a boat
Senator
lover.
Wicker is an important part of their bottom line. So they contribute huge amounts of money to his campaign to make sure he gets reelected. It's this virtuous cycle between Senator Wicker and the defense contractors that results in us spending more money on things that...
Chat, what happens with this, chat? Is that this every time this, then it gets taxed, goes a portion goes to the taxes, a portion goes to the taxes, a portion goes to the taxes, to the taxes. Is that?
And the defense contractors. That
Isn't it kinda like
results in
that?
us spending more money on things that maybe we don't
I always
need
think
to.
about the taxes.
Senator Wicker's job
It's
is
not
to
tax.
represent the American people. He sits on a committee that is supposed to be looking at our national security as a whole. And yet, thanks to the strategy of these for-profit defense contractors, this lawmaker has way too much incentive to advocate for more military spending, which is exactly what he does. My issue here is less with
I'm not being my
Senator
boat lover,
Wicker
low-key.
or Congressman Mike Rogers, who has the same thing, sits on a committee, gives a bunch of money to the Pentagon, has a state where billions of dollars of defense contract money comes into, takes tons of money from defense contractors for his campaign, gets reelected, continues to approve more money for the Pentagon, etc. My issue is with the system that allows this to happen, that allows the money from our military spending
So
to
capitalism?
be used to influence our lawmakers into more military spending. It's so clearly a conflict of interest. And it is this system that has created an environment where there is very little political pushback to the endless ratcheting up of our military budget.
Okay, this guy says no lobbyism, no corporatism. Okay, so what we're saying is capitalism then.
No congressperson wants to be the person who loses jobs in their district. Nobody wants to be the one known as shutting down a plant and people becoming unemployed. And so Lockheed can say
Well, am I
you
wrong?
have to have increased funding of this contract or you will lose jobs. And so that idea that jobs are essential, the Department of Defense spending is essential, really gives the contractor political power.
Let me make
Interesting.
one point clear, which is that this isn't all corporate lobbying that contributes to the US spending so much on the military. That would be too lazy of an explanation. We live in a world where there's a well-documented paradox that explains that strong militaries are actually the key ingredient to avoiding conflict.
True.
And deterring an enemy
That's
from
what I said.
attacking. Keeping a balance between big militaries so that no one attacks. Maybe someday we won't need militaries even close to the size that we have today. But it appears that in today's world we still do need big militaries with credible threats to avoid the age-old human curse of war. And yet on the other side of that paradox is the fact that if you grow your military, you force your adversary
Chat, when people think they can get away with it, they're always going to go for it. It's just what it
to do
is.
the same,
It's what it is.
to keep pace with you. The US and the Soviet Union did that for decades during the Cold War, each ratcheting up their military until suddenly both sides had over 10,000 nuclear warheads. That is madness. It diverges from the rational, and yet it's the logical result when we decide that the main solution to beating our rivals is to just make more weapons.
As the US spends more, Russia, China, other countries are spending more. If you look at the discretionary budget, about 50%.
Chat, what if everybody agreed, okay, to all like have bombs in all the countries, and it's like mutually assured destruction, and nobody spends on any material anymore because everybody has the bombs. And if something goes on, okay, everybody dies then. So nobody does it. Too easy, too easy. Then nobody's military, it's just the bombs.
Percent of that goes to the Department of Defense, and only 1 or 2% of that goes to the Department of State. You can see where our priorities are. A show of force is really the first foreign policy of the U.S.
For this one, the explanation is easy. Diplomacy is hard and complicated and long. It doesn't make leaders feel as powerful and secure as having a big military does. And no one's getting rich off diplomacy. And yet diplomacy, international law and organizations, treaties, cooperation, that is how we solve our differences. That is how we have learned to live peacefully on this globe. The fact is, no one ever achieved sustainable peace by spending more on their military. And finally, we have to remember that while we pour so much into our military, that is money that can't be spent elsewhere.
If we increase defense spending, that necessarily has to mean something else decreases. Bigger piece of the pie for defense, smaller piece of the pie for other things. And those other things might be healthcare, education, climate change, and so on. And then we can also think of this notion of security. What actually makes us secure? Does spending more on defense make us more secure? Well, if you look at other sources of security, having good roads and bridges, having safe drinking water, these are all things that...
Even though I think this is a little bit utopian, I think this is value saying, what happens if, let's say, fuck it, they're not going to spend on that one extra B whatever bomber, right? And then we're putting that exact amount, boom, into healthcare or schools. It makes a major difference for the other thing, but not a major difference for the military, does it?
That Americans need investment in to be safe, to be healthy. So we're economically secure. People have jobs that they can go to, funding for college. Those are all sources of security as well. So it's not just military security we need to think of when we think of the federal budget.
I deeply respect the men and women who work and serve the country in the military. But I think that our laws and norms around how much money...
It's utopian, but I don't think it's that simple. I don't think it's that. It's like saying, yo, Bill Gates, dumb fuck, why save money and have stocks and all the money if just can liquidate everything and fix the water problem in all of Africa? Okay, well, I don't think that's feasible.
Money we give to the military prevents us from assessing this situation clearly. The system we have incentivizes the wrong priorities.
Because throwing money at the wall doesn't do anything. You have to set up infrastructure, education. You have to level up the general health and well-being of people. You have to there's a lot of steps to making and maintaining those systems. You can't just, I build well, GG, too easy. It's not that simple.
More to do with profit margins of companies and the electability of lawmakers. All of this setting us on a path of infinite escalation that risks...
Some of the countries have corruption, bad government officials. The wells break. Who are they going to hire? Are they going to be maintained? Is the money being sent or whatever? Is it going to actually go to the wells, go to the water? Is it actually... No! These are things that take time. You have to... It takes tact. You have to develop. That's why they do. Sometimes some countries are called underdeveloped countries.
Ending in disaster. Hey, thanks for watching, everyone. If you haven't checked out Search Party, our other channel.
All right. I hate that I can't connect to you through this chat. I enjoyed the video. That was nice. I don't know what that means.
Can you listen to new John Bellion's song, I Think It's Amazing? Link?
I don't know who that is. I'm keeping it up with you.